This is a special report from CBS News in Washington, where the President is about to give an address on the energy crisis. Now, here is CBS News White House correspondent Dan Rather.
Good evening. President Nixon requested this time for a nationwide address. His subject is to be the nation's energy or fuel shortages. Much of what the President intends to do about the fuel shortages already has been made known by the White House. Tonight, however, Mr. Nixon wants to review the actions he believes necessary to meet shortages, plus explain some of the background and some of the outlook as he sees it for the future. Mr. Nixon will be speaking from his Oval Office in the White House. His address follows a day in which he's been involved in various briefings for outsiders.
Good evening. I want to talk to you tonight about a serious national problem, a problem we must all face together in the months and years ahead. As America has grown and prospered in recent years, our energy demands have begun to exceed available supplies. In recent months, we have taken many actions to increase supplies and to reduce consumption. But even with our best efforts, we knew that a period of temporary shortages was inevitable. Unfortunately, our expectations for this winter have now been sharply altered by the recent conflict in the Middle East. Because of that war, most of the Middle Eastern oil producers have reduced overall production and cut off their shipments of oil to the United States. By the end of this month, more than 2 million barrels a day of oil we expected to import into the United States will no longer be available. We must therefore face up to a very stark fact. We are heading toward the most acute shortages of energy since World War II. Our supply of petroleum this winter will be at least 10% short of our anticipated demands, and it could fall short by as much as 17%. Now, even before war broke out in the Middle East, these prospective shortages were the subject of intensive discussions among members of my administration, leaders of the Congress, governors, mayors, and other groups. From these discussions has emerged a broad agreement that we as a nation must now set upon a new course. In the short run, this course means that we must use less energy. That means less heat, less electricity, less gasoline. In the long run, it means that we must develop new sources of energy, which will give us the capacity to meet our needs without relying on any foreign nation. The immediate shortage will affect the lives of each and every one of us. In our factories, our cars, our homes, our offices, we will have to use less fuel than we are accustomed to using. Some school and factory schedules may be realigned, and some jet airplane flights will be canceled. This does not mean that we're going to run out of gasoline or that air travel will stop or that we will freeze in our homes or offices any place in America. The fuel crisis need not mean genuine suffering for any American, but it will require some sacrifice by all Americans. We must be sure that our most vital needs are met first, and that our least important activities are the first to be cut back. And we must be sure that while the fat from our economy is being trimmed, the muscle is not seriously damaged. To help us carry out that responsibility, I am tonight announcing the following steps. First, I am directing that industries and utilities which use coal, which is our most abundant resource, be prevented from converting from coal to oil. Efforts will also be made to convert power plants from the use of coal or oil to the use of coal. Second, we are allocating reduced quantities of fuel for aircraft. Now, this is going to lead to a cutback of more than 10% of the number of flights and some rescheduling of arrival and departure times. Third, there will be reductions of approximately 15% in the supply of heating oil for homes and offices and other establishments. To be sure that there is enough oil to go around for the entire winter all over the country, it will be essential for all of us to live and work in lower temperatures. We must ask everyone to lower the thermostat in your home by at least 6 degrees, so that we can achieve a national daytime average of 68 degrees. Incidentally, my doctor tells me that in a temperature of 66 to 68 degrees, you're really more healthy than when it's 75 to 78, if that's any comfort. In offices, factories, and commercial establishment, we must ask that you achieve the equivalent of a 10-degree reduction by either lowering the thermostat or curtailing working hours. Fourth, I am ordering additional reductions in the consumption of energy by the federal government. We have already taken steps to reduce the government's consumption by 7%. The cuts must now go deeper and must be made by every agency and every department in the government. I am directing that the daytime temperatures in federal offices be reduced immediately to a level of between 65 and 68 degrees. And that means in this room too, as well as in every other room in the White House. In addition, I am ordering that all vehicles owned by the federal government, and there are over 500,000 of them, travel no faster than 50 miles per hour, except in emergencies. This is a step which I have also asked governors, mayors, and local officials to take immediately with regard to vehicles under their authority. Fifth, I'm asking the Atomic Energy Commission to speed up the licensing and construction of nuclear plants. We must seek to reduce the time required to bring nuclear plants online, nuclear plants that can produce power, to bring them online from 10 years to 6 years, reduce that time lag. Sixth, I'm asking that governors and mayors reinforce these actions by taking appropriate steps at the state and local level. We've already learned, for example, from the state of Oregon, that considerable amounts of energy can be saved simply by curbing unnecessary lighting and slightly altering the school year. I am recommending that other communities follow this example and also seek ways to stagger working hours to encourage greater use of mass transit and carpooling. How many times have you gone along the highway or the freeway, wherever the case may be, and see hundreds and hundreds of cars with only one individual in that car? This we must all cooperate to change. Consistent with safety and economic considerations, I am also asking governors to take steps to reduce highway speed limits to 50 miles per hour. This action alone, if it is adopted on a nationwide basis, could save over 200,000 barrels of oil a day, just reducing the speed limit to 50 miles per hour. Now, all of these actions will result in substantial savings of energy. More than that, most of these are actions that we can take right now without further delay. The key to their success lies, however, not just here in Washington, but in every home, in every community across this country. If each of us joins in this effort, joins with the spirit and the determination that have always graced the American character, then half the battle will already be won. But we should recognize that even these steps, as essential as they are, may not be enough. We must be prepared to take additional steps, and for that purpose, additional authorities must be provided by the Congress. I have therefore directed my chief advisor for energy policy, Governor Love, and other administration officials to work closely with the Congress in developing an Emergency Energy Act. I met with the leaders of the Congress this morning, and I asked that they act on this legislation on a priority, urgent basis. It is imperative that this legislation be on my desk for signature before the Congress recesses this December. Because of the hard work that's already been done on this bill by Senators Jackson and Fannin and others, I am confident that we can meet that goal, and that I will have the bill on this desk and will be able to sign it. This proposed legislation would enable the executive branch to meet the energy emergency in several important ways. First, it would authorize an immediate return to daylight saving time on a year-round basis. Second, it would provide the necessary authority to relax environmental regulations on a temporary case-by-case basis, thus permitting an appropriate balancing of our environmental interests, which all of us share, with our energy requirements, which of course are indispensable. Third, it would grant authority to impose special energy conservation measures, such as restrictions on the working hours for shopping centers and other commercial establishments. And fourth, it would approve and fund increased exploration, development, and production from our naval petroleum reserves. Now, these reserves are rich sources of oil. From one of them alone, Elk Hills in California, we could produce more than 160,000 barrels of oil a day within 2 months. Fifth, it would provide the federal government with authority to reduce highway speed limits throughout the nation. And finally, it would expand the power of the government's regulatory agencies to adjust the schedules of planes, ships, and other carriers. If shortages persist despite all of these actions and despite inevitable increases in the price of energy products, it may then become necessary to take even stronger measures. It is only prudent that we be ready to cut the consumption of oil products such as gasoline by rationing or by a fair system of taxation. And consequently, I have directed that contingency plans, if this becomes necessary, be prepared for that purpose. Now, some of you may wonder whether we're turning back the clock to another age. Gas rationing, oil shortages, reduced speed limits. They all sound like a way of life we left behind with Glenn Miller in the War of the 40s. Well, in fact, part of our current problem also stems from war, the war in the Middle East. But our deeper energy problems come not from war, but from peace and from abundance. We are running out of energy today because our economy has grown enormously, and because in prosperity, what were once considered luxuries are now considered necessities. How many of you can remember when it was very unusual to have a home air conditioned? And yet this is very common in almost all parts of the nation. As a result, the average American will consume as much energy in the next 7 days as most other people in the world will consume in an entire year. We have only 6% of the world's people in America, but we consume over 30% of all the energy in the world. Now our growing demands have bumped up against the limits of available supply. And until we provide new sources of energy for tomorrow, we must be prepared to tighten our belts today. Let me turn now to our long-range plans. While a resolution of the immediate crisis is our highest priority, we must also act now to prevent a recurrence of such a crisis in the future. This is a matter of bipartisan concern. It's going to require a bipartisan response. 2 years ago, in the first energy message any president has ever sent to the Congress, I called attention to our urgent energy problem. Last April, this year, I reaffirmed to the Congress the magnitude of that problem, and I called for action on 7 major legislative initiatives. Again in June, I called for action. I have done so frequently since then. But thus far, not one major energy bill that I have asked for has been enacted. I realize that the Congress has been distracted in this period by other matters, but the time has now come for the Congress to get on with this urgent business, providing the legislation that will meet not only the current crisis, but also the long-range challenge that we face. Our failure to act now on our long-term energy problems could seriously endanger the capacity of our farms and of our factories to employ Americans at record-breaking rates. Nearly 86 million people are now at work in this country, and to provide the highest standard of living we or any other nation has ever known in history. It could reduce the capacity of our farmers to provide the food we need. It could jeopardize our entire transportation system. It could seriously weaken the ability of America to continue to give the leadership which only we can provide to keep the peace that we have won at such great cost of thousands of our finest young Americans. That is why it is time to act now on vital energy legislation that will affect our daily lives, not just this year, but for years to come. We must have the legislation now which will authorize construction of the Alaska pipeline, legislation which is not burdened with irrelevant and unnecessary provisions. We must have legislative authority to encourage production of our vast quantities of natural gas, one of the cleanest and best sources of energy. We must have the legal ability to set reasonable standards for the surface mining of coal. And we must have the organizational structures to meet and administer our energy programs. And therefore, tonight, as I did this morning in meeting with the congressional leaders, I again urge the Congress to give its attention to the initiatives I recommended 6 months ago to meet these needs that I have described. Finally, I have stressed repeatedly the necessity of increasing our energy research and development efforts. Last June, I announced a 5-year, $10 billion program to develop better ways of using energy and to explore and develop new energy sources. Last month, I announced plans for an immediate acceleration of that program. We can take heart from the fact that we in the United States have half the world's known coal reserves. We have huge untapped sources of natural gas. We have the most advanced nuclear technology known to man. We have oil in our continental shelves. We have oil shale out in the western part of the United States. And we have some of the finest technical and scientific minds in the world. In short, we have all the resources we need to meet the great challenge before us. Now, we must demonstrate the will to meet that challenge. In World War II, America was faced with the necessity of rapidly developing an atomic capability. The circumstances were grave. Responding to that challenge, this nation brought together its finest scientific skills and its finest administrative skills in what was known as the Manhattan Project. With all the needed resources at its command, with the highest priority assigned to its efforts, the Manhattan Project gave us the atomic capacity that helped to end the war in the Pacific and to bring peace to the world. 20 years later, responding to a different challenge, we focused our scientific and technological genius on the frontiers of space. We pledged to put a man on the moon before 1970. And on July 20, 1969, Neil Armstrong made that historic giant leap for mankind when he stepped on the moon. The lessons of the Apollo project and of the earlier Manhattan Project are the same lessons that are taught by the whole of American history. Whenever the American people are faced with a clear goal and they're challenged to meet it, we can do extraordinary things. Today, the challenge is to regain the strength we had earlier in this century, the strength of self-sufficiency. Our ability to meet our own energy needs is directly limited to our continued ability to act decisively and independently at home and abroad in the service of peace, not only for America, but for all nations in the world. I have ordered funding of this effort to achieve self-sufficiency far in excess of the funds that were expended on the Manhattan Project. But money is only one of the ingredients essential to the success of such a project. We must also have a unified commitment to that goal. We must have unified direction of the effort to accomplish it. Because of the urgent need for an organization that would provide focused leadership for this effort, I am asking the Congress to consider my proposal for an Energy Research and Development Administration, separate from any other organizational initiatives, and to enact this legislation in the present session of the Congress. Let us unite in committing the resources of this nation to a major new endeavor, an endeavor that in this bicentennial era we can appropriately call Project Independence. Let us set as our national goal, in the spirit of Apollo, with the determination of the Manhattan Project, that by the end of this decade, we will have developed the potential to meet our own energy needs without depending on any foreign energy sources. Let us pledge that by 1980, under Project Independence, we shall be able to meet America's energy needs from America's own energy resources. In speaking to you tonight in terms as direct as these, my concern has been to lay before you the full fact of the nation's energy shortage. It is important that each of us understands what the situation is and how the efforts we together can take to help to meet it are essential to our total effort. No people in the world perform more nobly than the American people when called upon to unite in the service of their country. I am supremely confident that while the days and weeks ahead may be a time of some hardship for many of us, they will also be a time of renewed commitment and concentration to the national interest. We have an energy crisis, but there is no crisis of the American spirit. Let us go forward then, doing what needs to be done, proud of what we have accomplished together in the past, and confident of what we can accomplish together in the future. Let us find in this time of national necessity a renewed awareness of our capacities as a people, a deeper sense of our responsibilities as a nation, and an increased understanding that the measure and the meaning of America has always been determined by the devotion which each of us brings to our duty as citizens of America. I should like to close with a personal note. It was just 1 year ago that I was reelected as President of the United States of America. During this past year, we have made great progress in achieving the goals that I set forth in my reelection campaign. We have ended the longest war in America's history. All of our prisoners of war have been returned home. And for the first time in 25 years, no young Americans are being drafted into the armed services. We have made progress toward our goal of a real prosperity, a prosperity without war. The rate of unemployment is down to 4.5%, which is the lowest unemployment in peacetime that we've had in 16 years. And we are finally beginning to make progress in our fight against the rise in the cost of living. These are substantial achievements in this year, 1973. But I would be less than candid if I were not to admit that this has not been an easy year in some other respects, as all of you are quite aware. As a result of the deplorable Watergate matter, great numbers of Americans have had doubts raised as to the integrity of the President of the United States. I've even noted that some publications have called on me to resign the office of President of the United States. Tonight, I would like to give my answer to those who have suggested that I resign. I have no intention whatever of walking away from the job I was elected to do. As long as I am physically able, I'm going to continue to work 16 to 18 hours a day for the cause of a real peace abroad and for the cause of prosperity without inflation and without war at home. And in the months ahead, I shall do everything that I can to see that any doubts as to the integrity of the man who occupies the highest office in this land, to remove those doubts where they exist. And I am confident that in those months ahead, the American people will come to realize that I have not violated the trust that they placed in me when they elected me as President of the United States in the past. And I pledge to you tonight that I shall always do everything that I can to be worthy of that trust in the future. Thank you and good night.
This is Dan Rather, CBS News in Washington. With me is my colleague George Herman. In case you joined us late and did not get all of what the President said, he spoke for about 25 minutes, a few seconds shorter than that. He dealt most of the time with the nation's, as he put it, energy emergency. In the last 3 or 4 minutes, the President shifted the focus of his address and put words to the thrust of, "I will not resign. I have no intention of walking away from this office," and urged the nation to look toward the future and his administration in days ahead. Now, analysis of the President's remarks will be carried on CBS News broadcast tomorrow. For the remaining moments of this hour, we will deal with summary, reaction, and background. For a summary of the President's remarks on the energy emergency, George Herman.
Thank you. Pretty much the President said what he'd been expected to say, what he'd been urged very much by members of Congress to say. He said that plants which are using or have used coal in the past will be made to use coal again rather than the scarce fuel oil. He talked about a cutback in airline flights and more efficient use of the airlines, which would save a good deal of fuel. He talked about a 15% cut in residential fuel oil. That's number 2 home heating oil. 15% reduction. That's going to be a hardship on many people because their customers have increased and they're going to be getting 15% less to give to those increased customers. He said the federal government will reduce the use of energy, and he said with a smile that the temperature in his room in the White House, and in fact in all the White House, is going to be 65 to 68 degrees from now on. He said the Atomic Energy Commission would be asked to speed up the bringing online of new atomic energy electrical plants. He said schools and localities will cut their use, and he dropped a little hint that they will be encouraged to have schools. He said states and localities, excuse me, and he dropped a hint that schools will be asked to change their practices, meaning that they'll be asked to close during the coldest part of the winter and open up again during slightly warmer weather. He talked about a speed limit of 50 miles an hour, which will save a great deal of fuel oil. He talked about an emergency energy act from Congress, which he hopes to have before they recess, and that would include in that act a return to daylight saving time all year round, a relaxation of environmental fuel requirements, and contingency plans for gasoline rationing. And he talked finally about an emergency research project so that the United States would be independent. He called it Project Independence, to make the United States independent of outside energy sources by the year 1980. Dan?
The current energy situation, as outlined by the President and his aides, is this. Shortages of crude oil and crude oil products this winter are expected to run between 10 and 17% of demand. Right now, the shortages are running approximately 10% of demand. That is the White House's official assessment of where we are and why the President is doing what he is doing, according to a fact sheet issued by the White House press office this evening. The President emphasized that the situation could get worse than the estimates now are. The estimates that our shortages of fuel run somewhere between 10 and 17% of demand. Governor John Love, who handles the energy situation for the President, emphasized in a briefing just before the President's remarks tonight that one reason the President has waited as long as he has to deal with the situation is the situation has become worse because of the recent Middle East war. For George Herman and CBS News, Dan Rather in Washington, good night.
This has been a special report from CBS News. This is CBS.